I don't know. She's kind of, I don't know, setting a standard for what's humanly possible.
I will do anything I possibly can in legal form to make me the best that I can be, and I want to have the best resources I possibly can to be the best I can be.
In July at the Olympic trials, she won both the 50 and 100-meter freestyles, setting a record in the 50. Another new American record for the 41-year-old mom.
I've finally done away with the myth that you have to be a teenager to be a fast swimmer. I'm opening the doors for other people to do things and not put an age limit on their dreams.
Oh, it's so nice to be back in California. I live in Massachusetts now. I grew up in LA, and just the weather. I'm just so glad to be back. And it's nice to be here too. Yeah, every time, I didn't watch it this time, but every time I hear it, I cringe when I hear the 100th of a second. It's just, we'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, how are you guys doing today? It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a while since I've been to Malibu, so it's just wonderful driving through here. Even with the traffic, I was okay. It was like, just taking it all in. So I started my career back when I was a kid. I grew up in LA, and we had a pool in our backyard, and my mom wanted us water safe, and so she had us in the pool at a real early age. I had lots of energy as a kid. I think now they call it ADHD, but I just had lots of energy as a kid. I think back then they called it hyperactive, and was always doing stuff. I grew up with 4 older brothers. They were always playing sports. I wanted to play sports, and my mom would take my brothers to the pool it was in Culver City, or in Venice, and would swim, and I'd be in the stands running all over the place. And I think my mom finally was like, okay, let's just get her in the pool and get that energy out, so when she comes home, she's tired and goes to bed. And so I started swimming really early on a team when I was about maybe 7 or 8 years old. Swam at the Beverly Hills YMCA in Culver City and Mission Viejo. Just loved growing up and swimming in Southern California. I made my first Olympic team when I was a junior in high school in 1984 at the LA Olympics, which was great because it was my hometown, and all my friends can come watch me swim, and I had a great time. It was a wonderful experience, and I won a gold medal there, and then I continued on with swimming and swam in college, went to University of Florida, and went to the next Olympics, which was in '88 in Seoul, Korea, and won a silver and bronze there. And then I graduated college, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting old, I'm gonna move on with my life. I really wanted to get into television. There was something about it I really loved. I loved the way broadcasters, they would interview athletes and talk with them and just get answers out of them that maybe other people couldn't. It's just something I really wanted to do. So I moved to New York, and after I graduated college in the late '80s, or actually it was '90, and started working at NBC Sports and was having a great time. And I'll never forget, one of the things they had us, I started as an intern and sort of tried to work my way up. And one of the things they had us do was log tape, which if there's any young kids in here probably don't know what tape is, but like VHS tapes and beta tapes. And we had to log them and sort of write down the numbers of where certain quotes were or certain parts in their performances. And the tapes I was logging was of a figure skater named Brian Boitano. And he was talking about making a comeback and how he retired. And something just resonated, that word comeback resonated with me. And I thought, wow, maybe it'd be really a good thing to try and go back to the Olympics and try for a 3rd Olympics, because not many people have done that. And I'd be kind of old, I'd be 25 years old, but who cares if I'm old? I'm just going to go and try and do this. And so I moved back to University of Florida and trained there for a year and ended up making my 3rd Olympic team, which was in Barcelona. And I actually ended up being the oldest one on the team at 25, so old that they called me the grandmother on the team. And it's funny because now that's like a normal age to be swimming is 25, and back then it was really old. And so I won't tell you what they called me when I made it at 41. But anyway, so I made that team. I won a gold medal there. I had the privilege of being one of the team captains. Just a wonderful experience. But I thought, okay, there's no money in the sport of swimming. That's probably one of the reasons why you didn't see a lot of older people in the sport of swimming. Most people, when they were done with college, that was it. They moved on with their life, got on with their career. And so now I'm 25. I moved back to New York, got into modeling a little bit, really wanted to get back into television, was able to do that, and was just enjoying my life for the next 7 years. I had no desire to get back into swimming. It's funny because in the sport of swimming, it's a year-round sport. I don't want to say it takes a toll on your body because there's not a lot of injuries in swimming, but it's exhausting and it can get a little bit monotonous after a while. I mean, it's wonderful exercise, but it just gets to a point where when you're at the end stages of your career, either you want to continue on maybe in masters and just do it for fun and exercise, or you want nothing to do with it. And I guess after '92, I really wanted nothing to do with it. And so I was living in New York for 7 years and really enjoying it. And some friends came into town. I went to dinner with them. And like a year before the Olympics, they have the logos on TV that NBC has, like the Olympic rings. And then you start seeing the commercials about it. And you start seeing, on the morning shows, the different athletes coming and talking about how they're training. And so I guess that was happening. It was a year before the 2000 Olympics. And when I went out to dinner with these friends, and they started asking me about the swimmers and who to watch. And I really didn't know. I mean, I hadn't been in the pool for 7 years. I hadn't been to a swim meet. And I didn't know who was out there and what was going on. But what happened is, I think after just the hour and a half long talk of swimming in the Olympics, and it kind of sparked something in me. And that night I went to sleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night like I was having this nightmare that I was back in the Olympics, and I dove in the wrong lane, and then I did a flip turn and my feet hit the wall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I woke up, I was like, oh, this is just a dream. And I was living in New York City at the time. I'm like, all right, I'll just go for a run in Central Park. And I'm running along in Central Park, and as I'm running, this, I don't know, maybe 70, 75-year-old lady just passes me. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's she doing? And I start speeding up, because then the competitive juices start going in me. And I guess I thought that when you get older, things sort of dissipate and you're more calm and relaxed. But I think the competitiveness never dies. I learned that very quickly. And so, yeah, she ended up beating me in the run. But anyway, so I decided I couldn't get the thought out of my head about the Olympics. Like, just this one dinner with some friends, talking about the Olympic Games, just sparked something in me. So I called my mom, who was living in Sun Valley, Idaho at the time, and I said, hey, Mom, I'm thinking about coming back. She's like, great, what flight are you on? I'll pick you up. And I'm like, no, I'll come back and visit you, but I mean coming back like swimming-wise. And she had me on speaker, and my stepdad was in the background, and he's like, oh, that's great, follow your dreams. And he's always like a go-getter, and he used to play tennis. And so I guess I was kind of hoping someone would maybe talk me out of it, because when I get a thought in my head, it's like I focus on it and I kind of go for it. And I was 32, and being 25 and being called the grandma, 32 was really, really old to be swimming. But I thought, you know what, that's like a cool thing, like someone older trying this. And I haven't been in the water for 7 years, and I just one of these people that really like challenges. And so I called a coach out at Stanford, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about coming back. Would you be up for coaching me? He's like, well, let me talk to, he coached the women's Stanford team and also was going to be the head Olympic coach for the women's team for the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. And he said, yeah, let me talk to my team and see what they think about you coming out. I said, great. So called me back the next day. He's like, how soon can you get out here? I said, I can come in a week. I can move out in a week. And that was like a 2-week span from when I had that dinner to now I'm out training for an Olympics again. I hadn't been in the pool for 7 years. And so I flew out to Palo Alto and found a place quick to live in and just started my training. And I remember the first day, and I remember I had not, even when I knew I was going to be out there the next week, it's not like I went to a pool and got in really quick and started swimming so I wouldn't look horrible when I got there. But I just kind of packed everything, got everything ready to go, and I left. And I still hadn't been in a pool. So I go out for my first workout and put a swimsuit on. They changed a little bit over the last 7 years. And I dive in the pool and I start swimming. And I'm like, wow, this kind of feels good. They talk about muscle memory, and I'm swimming along. And I had one of these strokes that really had high elbows and really pretty stroke. And my best event was the quickest event there is. And normally there's really quick turnover when you do that. And you kind of splash a lot and make a lot of, your arms turn over really quick. But my stroke was just a very long, smooth stroke for such a short event. And so after 2 laps, the coach sticks a kickboard in the pool when I'm doing a flip turn so my feet would hit it, so I knew to stop. And I looked up and I'm like, oh, he's probably going to compliment me on my stroke. I still look good after 7 years, And he looks down, he's like, Dara, we don't swim like that anymore. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, your stroke. He goes, we used to emulate it as coaches because it's always a nice, pretty stroke, but we just don't swim like that anymore. And so he proceeded to tell me how the stroke had changed in the last 7, 8 years. And he said, you know what, we have about 200 kids coming for camp. I really think you should be in this camp with them. So, because it's all stroke work and you can swim with these kids. I'm like, all right. And so the next day I go and there's from 8-year-olds to 16-year-olds, and here I am 32. And I put my white cap on and I write Torres on it, and I get in the pool with these kids and start sort of relearning the stroke again. And the funny thing is that I had 11 months to train for Olympic trials, and when I got to Olympic trials, he still was tweaking my stroke. And I'm the type that like when someone shows me something, I pick it up really quick and that's it. But it was, I guess, after doing something your whole entire life and that's what you're used to doing, it's really hard to sort of change that, you know, whether it's like a mental thing or a physical thing. And so it took a while, and took my mental aspect of being okay with being told again and again what to do, or how to do it, that's okay. You know, it's just a learning process. So I made that Olympic team in 2001, I don't know, 5 medals, whatever. And I remember, it's always weird like talking about yourself, but I remember standing on the awards podium for my last medal, which was a relay, and it was a gold. And they were putting the medal around my neck, and the flag's raising, and they're playing the national anthem. I'm trying not to cry, and I'm crying, and then I'm like, wait, what am I crying about? And then I thought, well, I'm going to go back to New York. My job's not there. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Yeah, I won 5 medals. It's nice, but like, what am I going to do? Like, there's always a younger, prettier person coming up and getting into sports, and you know, I don't have a job. And so I was a little bit bummed, even though here I am with this gold medal around my neck. I was kind of bummed because I'm always like sort of thinking ahead, and my life has always been structured from the sport of swimming. I always knew when my meets were, when my workouts were, I knew when my homework was in school, and so this was a little bit different for me. And I go back to the States, and I just sort of started life again. I get back into television, and everything was great. And like about 5 years later, I get pregnant with my daughter at 39 years old, and I'll never forget. I'm like, okay, if I ever get pregnant, I'm going to work out. I love working out. I love fitness. I love being healthy. I love the way working out makes me feel on the inside and getting rid of stress. I like the way it makes me look on the outside. It's just something that's always been a part of my life. And so I thought, well, you know, if I you know, get pregnant ever, I want to make sure that I work out. And so I got pregnant, was very happy, and I went to my doctor. I said, what do I do? He said, you know what, just follow off how you feel, and if you have a hard time breathing, just know your baby will have a hard time breathing. Other than that, that's your barometer. I'm like, great. So I go to the gym about 7 weeks along, and I go to the gym, and of course I see the hardest machine like staring at me as I walk in, and it's the one, you guys know, the one that the stairs roll and everyone's like hanging on it because it's so hard. They're not like actually like, you know, going on it. It's like everyone just has the worst form on that thing. I'm like, I'm gonna go on that. And so I get on there, and I'm going along, and after about 10 minutes I get sick to my stomach. It goes over the edge. I'm like, that's not good. I get off, I clean it up, I go home, I rest. Next day I'm feeling great. I'm like, I'm gonna go to the gym again, and I'll try to find a different machine. But I walk in, and it's like I see it, it's just like narrows in, and I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna go back to that machine again. I gotta conquer this thing. And I get back on there, and maybe last 8 minutes, get sick again. People are looking at me. I'm like, that's not good. I clean it up. I go home, and I'm like, this isn't good. If this is the way it's gonna be, at least for the first 3 months, this is not a good thing. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, what can I do? What can I do? And I'm like, wait a minute. I can swim. I go to the pool, I get sick in the gutter, and I keep going. It's not a big deal. No one's gonna know, you know? I'll go swim. I don't know why it took me so long to think of that. And so my boyfriend who I was with, I said, is there a pool around here? And you'd think I'd know every pool in the country since I've been in the sport for so many years. But this was an area in Florida I didn't really know called Coral Springs. And he said, yeah, he said, there's actually an Olympic-sized pool. Now, I don't go and talk about myself or talk about swimming really unless someone asks me. And so he and I, even though we'd been dating for a while, we didn't really talk about swimming. He said he swam a long time ago. I'm like, oh, that's great, you know. And that's all I really knew. I didn't really talk about it. And so when he said there's an Olympic-sized pool, I didn't know how much he really knew about swimming. I was expecting like to walk into like, you know, those hotels and it says Olympic-sized pool. It's like the size of the stage. Well, that's what I was expecting. And so I get in the car the next day and I go. He tells me where it is, and I walk in, and sure enough, he's right. There's an Olympic-sized pool in Coral Springs. There was a beautiful Olympic-sized pool. There was a diving well. There was a 25-meter by 25-yard pool. There was a kids pool. I'm like, oh, and it was like 80 degrees outside. I'm like, this is wonderful. Forget the gym. And I'm walking around a little bit, and I go into the front office. And you know, it's funny because when I went in the office, I wanted to see about some swimming programs, but I didn't want anyone to know I was pregnant. I just wanted them to be like, yeah, you're 38 years old. You can come in and swim with us, no problem. So I walk in, and there's this elderly lady in there. And I say, excuse me, I'd like to find out about your swim programs. And she looks at me, and she's like, well, have you ever swum before? And I was like, a little bit. And she said, okay. She says, well, you good? And I'm like, I'm okay. And she said, well, tell you what, we have these brochures on the wall that talk about all the different swim programs we have. Why don't you take a look and you can figure out which group you're going to be in? And I'm like, okay. And there must be like 15 different sections of brochures. And there's a green group and a yellow group and a master's group and this group. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm looking at this thing, and then I think she sees the confusion on my face, and she goes, did you figure out what group you're in? I said, no, I mean, there's so many groups here, I don't know which one to go in. And she said, tell you what. She said, have you ever swum any swim meets before? And I said, yeah, a couple. And she said, here's a piece of paper. Why don't you write down if you have any accomplishments? I'll give it to the coach. He can decide what group you're in. I was like, okay. So I start writing it down, and I'm writing. She's like, what the heck is she writing? And I'm just writing. And I fold it up, I give it to her. She said, put your name and number on there. I said, no. I put my name and number. I give it back to her. And I'm like, thank you very much. And I leave. And about 2 hours later, the head coach calls me, and he's laughing. He's like, why didn't you tell her you were? And I'm like, well, I don't know. She didn't ask. So she just asked if I swam, and I said yes. And so he said, are you thinking about swimming again? And I said, I don't know. I think I'll just want to swim. And again, I didn't tell him I was pregnant. And he said, why don't you come in tomorrow? I'll give you a proper tour of the pool and the different facilities we have and the gym, which I didn't see. And I'm like, great. So I go in the next day, and we're walking around, and he's showing me everything. But the whole entire time we're walking, it's like, oh, we have a wonderful master's program, and this is the master's coach, and master's this, master's that. Never like, oh, it'd be great if you swam with our kids because they might learn something from you, or anything like that. It was just master's, master's, master's. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm on the master's team now. And you got to understand that when you're growing up as a swimmer, and I think there's a few swimmers in here, but when you hear masters, that's just like, it sounds like it's for old people, And so I was 38, I'm like, well, I'm not that old, and I shouldn't be swimming with these old people. And I came to learn that it starts like at 21 years old, but I didn't know. Just when you're in competitive swimming, masters was always for the older people. And so I got in the next day, and the master's coach I met that previous day, and I finally told him I was pregnant. And I think the reason why I didn't want the head coach to know, because I wanted him, even though I was 38, I wanted him to say, hey, come swim with my team. Not like, oh, you can't swim with my team because you're pregnant, but that's why I didn't tell him. And it still didn't matter. He just didn't want me to swim with his team. So I started my first workout. I told the coach the parameters of what the doctor told me, and I started swimming with the master's team. And it was great. I had a really good time. It was kind of early, 6 a.m. I wasn't used to that again. I'd taken 5 years off, so I wasn't used to getting up that early. But it was good. And I remember about 6 months in, I'm in the pool, and I'm swimming along, and we're doing a set, and I look over, and there's this middle-aged guy racing me. I'm like, what's he doing, And I start going a little bit faster, and he's going faster. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, I can't let this middle-aged man beat me. There's no way. I don't want this middle-aged man to beat me. And he's probably thinking, oh, I'm beating an Olympian, not a 6-month pregnant Olympian, but an Olympian. And there I am, like racing this guy, and I touch the wall really quick, and I put my goggles up, and there are these two sneakers sitting there. It's the coach. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I can't help it. This guy is trying to race me. I don't want him to beat me. And so when you're pregnant, you get competitive, I guess, also. And he's like, Dara, you know what the doctor said? And I said, well, I can't help it, And tell you what, let him go, wait 30 seconds, and then, you take off. I said, fine. So 30 seconds seemed like 3 minutes. And so he takes off. I'm waiting 30 seconds, and I go. And now I'm like, where is he? Am I catching up to him? What's he doing, And after that, I got out of the pool. I'm like, you know what? This child is much more important than me racing a middle-aged guy. And of course, I was middle-aged too, but it didn't matter. I just didn't want this guy beating me. And so I decided just to go and do my own thing for the remainder of my pregnancy. And I coaxed someone into training with me for those next few months. But about a week before I was supposed to deliver, the head coach, Michael, comes up to me, who didn't let me swim with him. And he said, Dara, I need to ask you a favor. And I was like, sure. And he said, we have this swim meet in a month, and I know you're supposed to deliver in a week, but do you think you can ask your doctor if you can swim 3 weeks after you deliver? And now I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at my 9-month belly, and I'm thinking, this is such a guy thing to ask. But yeah, no problem. I'll ask my doctor. I didn't ask my doctor. I was like mortified to ask him. So I go in, I have my daughter, and I'm so excited. I finally have a child at 39. I just turned 39 like 3 days prior to that, and I'm so excited, and she's on my chest, and I'm feeling so good because I'm just completely drugged up, and I don't have a care in the world. And the doctor walks by, and hey, I was just walking by. I grab his lab coat. I'm like, hey, Dr. Zafran. I said, I have a swim meet in 3 weeks. You don't mind if I swim in it, do you? And he's looking at me. He's like, you're kidding, right? I'm like, no, my coach asked me to ask you. And again, I'm just feeling so good from all the drugs. And he was like, Dara, he said, you know, you can't do anything aerobically for at least 6 weeks. I mean, you go to the gym tomorrow if you want. I highly doubt you'll want to, but you can't do anything aerobically for 6 weeks. I'm like, all right, you know. And so he was right. The next day I woke up, I didn't want to go to the gym. And I actually waited a week and a half, which is very long for me. And I remember my first, I got a nanny to help me out a little bit. And I went to the gym just to do something for myself. And I remember walking out, I was like, oh, what a great sight, a gym. I get to start working out again. And I go to the tricep extensions, you know those ropes that you have and you can just kind of go like this. And I'm just, you know, feeling pretty good, just kind of get my feel back for being in the gym. And as I'm doing this, I look over the side of my shoulder, I'm like, God, there's someone who looks familiar to me. I'm like, oh my God, it's my doctor, you know. And the good thing about these ropes, and I didn't know if he was kidding if he said I could go to the gym the next day, you know. And so I was like, because he's a jokester a little bit. So the good thing about these ropes is you can just kind of turn, you know. They kind of turn like this, and you know, he can't see me. And so I was like, all right. And then I feel this. I'm like, oh gosh. And I'm like, hey, Dr. Zafran, how you doing? And he's like, so I see you at the gym. I'm like, look, you said I can go the next day. I waited a week and a half. And he's like, all right. And now the good thing about working out is you get these endorphins going, so you feel like really good. And I had been so tired for the past week and a half that it just felt so good to be in the gym. And so I was feeling pretty good, like I was on drugs, but I was on endorphins, you know. And so I turned to the doctor and I said, Dr. Zafran, I said, you know, I have a meeting in a week and a half. You don't mind if I swim in it, do you? And I don't know why that came out or how that came out. It just kind of did. And you know, the endorphins just kind of get going. And he turned to me, he's like, you know, Dara, he goes, go ahead and swim. And I was like, wait, what? And he said, us doctors, we say 6 weeks. We don't really know. And before he can get another word out of his mouth, I was out that door, out my house, putting a swimsuit on, not a pretty sight, going to the pool, and getting in swimming, because I'm like, I had this meet in a week and a half I was going to swim in, and it was going to be fun. And so the reason why the coach had wanted me to swim in this meet is because Coral Springs was hosting it, and he thought if I was swimming the meet that I just had a baby, they'd put me in the newspaper on the front page, and it would garner people to come to the pool and watch, and just, I guess, garner excitement. And so that was the main reason why he had wanted me to do that. And so I go to this meet, and I swam, and it was fun. It was a good time. Well, the whole time I had been pregnant, my boyfriend had decided he wanted to start swimming again. He hadn't swum in a while. And he swam in this meet and really had a good time. And he's like, you know, Dara, he goes, there's another meet in 2 months out in Palo Alto where you train for 2,000. I think we should take our daughter out there and go out and swim. I'm like, all right. And so I did that. And the hardest thing for me is, like, if I say I'm going to do something, I don't want to just do it like partially. I want to give it sort of my all. And I thought, well, at least if I could swim 3 days a week and get a nanny to come and help me out, it'd be great. But the hardest thing for me was figuring out how to find a balance. Like how do you find a balance leaving your newborn to go do something you like to do, or maybe it was even like work or whatever, and not feel guilty. And that was like the worst feeling inside of me. But I really looked to working parents out there sort of as my inspiration, because, you know, a lot of working parents will go and start working, you know, a few weeks or a couple months after, you know, they've had a kid. And it really helped me realize that it's okay to do that. Like, first of all, I'm not even going to remember. But second of all, you know, you have to have a life too, but you also want to be the best parent you can be. So I really found a good balance that worked for myself and for my daughter while I was doing this and as I continued on. We went to this Masters meet, biggest meet I've ever been to in my life. It's so big. There must have been about almost 5,000 swimmers there. And I'm used to maybe 1,000 at the most. And so it was so big that Stanford, where I trained, had two Olympic-sized pools. So they had men in one pool and the women in the other. And so I swam, had a great time. I don't know, somehow I made Olympic trial cuts. I don't know how I did that, but somehow I did. But that was it. I was like, all right, I'm done, you know. And it was fun. And as the meet was going on, it was like a 4-day meet. People started coming up to me and like, God, it'd be great to see a 40-year-old in the Olympics. I'm like, all right, who's going? Let's cheer him on, you know? And I'm like, that's awesome. And after a while, I'm like, wait a minute, are they talking about me? Like, do they want me to go to the Olympics? You don't understand, Masters swimmers are very they just are on you all the time. Like, if they want something, they're not going to stop. And I felt like out of the 5,000 swimmers, probably 4,800 came up to me and were like, we want to see you in the Olympic Games. And it was so much peer pressure. I was like, all right, I'll do it. And the problem with me saying that is that when I say something, I'm actually going to do it. And I got home, I'm like, David, what did I tell him I was going to do? He said, you said you're going to train for the next Olympics. I'm like, we're not going to be 41. I go, when I was a kid, like, my parents were in their 40s, and I was always so old, you know? And he's like, well, you said you were going to do it? I'm like, yeah. And so I started thinking to myself, I was like, well, how am I going to do this? You know, I'm 41. Can my body deal with it? I mean, I was actually 39, but I was like, can my body handle this? I've had shoulder injuries in the past. Can I recover? You know, what do I eat? Can I do this with a newborn? You know, it's had all these questions in my head, and then after I got them in my head and out of my head, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And so that's how it happened. It wasn't like this light bulb went off and I had this big dream that I was going to be in the Olympics and this is what I had to do. It was just the peer pressure of these master swimmers on me that I was like, all right, I'll do it. So it's funny, there were two types of people I encountered when I decided to make this comeback for 2008. There were the type that was like, aren't you too old for this? And then there's the other type was like, yeah, you can do this, which was basically my family, which I don't even know if they actually believed I could do it or not, but they were very supportive. And so the way I started to look at it was like, all right, you know, you have Jack Nicklaus, who was 46 when he won a Masters, and you have Nolan Ryan pitched a no-hitter at 44, bless you, at 44 years old. Why can't a 41-year-old mom go for an Olympic Games? And that's sort of what my thought process was. You know, it's funny because Michael, when I told him I wanted to make a comeback, he didn't say, oh, come swim with my group. He was like, you know what, the Masters coach did good with you. You can swim with the Masters coach. So I trained for the next probably 6 months with a Masters coach with no one else really to train with because I trained in the mornings and after everyone had already left because I had my daughter, I couldn't just leave at like 6 in the morning. And so I was training on my own but the times I was doing was so much faster than what Michael's kids were doing, but yet he still wasn't like, hey, come train with us. I don't know if he thought I was just too old or if he didn't think I was serious about it, but he obviously didn't know me well enough to know that once I say I'm going to do something, I'm really going to do it. And so after 7 months, he finally said, all right, you can swim with us now. And I'll never forget my first workout. I was in a lane with like a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old and maybe a 14-year-old, and we stopped after one of our sets, and one girl turns to the other. She's like, you know, I'm thinking about getting a pierced ear. And the other girl's like, I don't know who to take to the prom. And I'm thinking, what diapers do I need for my daughter now? She's getting bigger, you know. And it was just the weirdest dynamics, like being with these teenagers, and I'm older than their parents. But the great thing about it was that I didn't want some young whippersnappers beating me, and they sure didn't want someone older than their parents beating them. And so it actually ended up being a very good mesh. It was interesting. The hardest thing for me in this comeback was realizing that I can't do what everyone else is doing. Like, I was always a type of person or type of athlete that always did more than everyone because I thought, okay, they're going home and resting. I'm going to go for a run now and do more because I'm going to be better than them. I always thought more was better. And so that's what my psyche was. And so when I started this comeback and I was training with the kids, I couldn't do even half of what they were doing. So when I trained in 2000, I was swimming 9 workouts a week. By the time I got training, and I was at 32, 33 years old, and now I'm 39, 40, going at 41, I could only do 5 workouts a week. Like, that was all I could do. And so in my head, it's like, well, that's not enough. Like, these kids are doing so much more than I am. How am I going to even make the Olympic team or even make Olympic trials if I'm not doing what they're doing? And so it took me a long time in my mind to understand that it's okay. Like, I had to do what was best for me, not what was best for everyone else. And that was a hard mental block for me to get over because that's not what my psyche was my whole entire life. People ask me all the time, how was I going to do this? I had no idea. I was very lucky that I was able to get some sponsorship, that I could afford this. I was able to hire someone in the world of strength training who really thought outside of the box, not the normal. Like, when I trained in 2000, it was like the heavier you lift in the weight room, the stronger you'll be in the water. And that didn't really equate well because every time I got more muscle, I felt heavier in the water. When I worked with this new strength guy named Andy O'Brien, he was like, the more efficient you are in the weight room, the more efficient you'll be when you swim. And if you look at some of the best swimmers, they don't look the strongest on the blocks. Like, Michael Phelps obviously is tall and lean, but he doesn't look the strongest. There are other guys that look much stronger than him, but he is so efficient in the water that makes him so much faster than everyone else. So I had a great strength coach. I had now Michael, and it's funny because Michael had a physiology degree and knew how much the body could and couldn't do. So I actually ended up having the best swim coach for me. I had massage therapists. I had stretching trainers. Everything for me, the biggest word was recovery. I had to get my body to recover. Some of you guys probably know as you get a little older, you think you can do what you did when you were younger, but you can't. And if you feel something hurting when you're older, you actually go see a doctor. When you're younger, you're like, oh, I'll just swim through it, you know. So it's really different dynamics from when I was younger to when I was trying this when I was older. I knew that if I was going to do this, I had to surround myself with special people, and I really feel like I did. I feel like when I went into this, we all had a role. Mine obviously was the one that did the training and went to the swim meets, but the strength trainer had a role, the massage therapist, the stretching trainers, everyone had a role, and there were no egos. And so I felt very blessed that I surrounded myself with really special people, because if I was going to make it, it was going to be something special that I did. I want to share with you something that spoke to me about the power of teamwork. In the 1960 Olympic Games in Rome, Wilma Rudolph was declared the fastest woman in the world. What very few people remember is she was a woman of enormous grace and dignity. She wore braces on her legs until she was 12 years old. Later in life, she wrote, "No matter what accomplishments you make, somebody helps you." And it speaks to the connections among us that make us excellent or leave us simply average. And one little side note about that is Wilma Rudolph found her strength in her family. Of her illness, she said her doctor said she'd never walk. Her mother said she would, so she listened to her mom. So I trained for the next little less than 2 years for the '08 Olympics. There were times when I would be on my coach's couch just crying from exhaustion. There were times I'd be up because my daughter was sick or throwing up or whatever was going on, but you know, somehow I managed to make it work. And I ended up making my 5th Olympic team in '08, and I qualified actually for 4 events. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but I qualified for 4 events. I scratched one because swimming changed over the years. Back in the early days when I swam, all they had, if you swam a 50, 100, or a 200, you only swam the event twice. You swam in the preliminaries in the morning and the finals at night. That all changed, I think in '96 it changed where they added semifinals. So if you swam the distance of a 50, 100, or 200, you had to swim it actually 3 times. You had preliminaries, semifinals, and finals. So for me to swim 4 events and having all those different times you had to swim, there was just no way my body was going to recover. So I had to let go of one event, which was the 100 freestyle. I decided not to swim that. But it's funny because when you make the Olympic team, they never had someone, at least on the swim team, make the Olympic team with a kid. And so I wasn't really sure how I was going to do this. The problem with United States swimming is that once you make the team, you're on the team. You have to go to the training camp. It's not like I can go home and say, okay, I'm going to go be with my daughter for a couple of weeks until the training camp's done. I mean, I had to go to the training camp, and that was probably the hardest thing for me was being away from her. I was gone for 6 weeks, and I saw her for 2 days in those 6 weeks. My ex brought her out to Palo Alto, and that's where we trained for a little bit before heading on to Asia. And so that was really hard. But it's funny because when I made the team, I was like, how am I going to fit in here? The youngest kid on the team is 15. I'm 41. The trainers and coaches were my age, and I didn't know if I was sort of the den mother or like a big sister, or I don't know what I was, but I did know that it was different for me in the sense that like during the day I'd have to come out of the hotel room and be like, turn off your music, I'm trying to nap, you know, or I'd be in the cafeteria and it'd stop food fights, and I just didn't know quite where I fit in. If anything, I was just hoping that if anyone had anything they wanted to talk about, or you know, if there was their first Olympic Games and it was their first experience, I can kind of tell them what to expect. That's where I really wanted to fit in, and I felt like that happened. It was once we had our training camp in Palo Alto, we went on to Singapore because it was the same time zone as Beijing, and then we went on to Beijing. And I'll never forget, everyone kept talking about the smog, fog, or whatever was over there. And we land, and you couldn't even see the runway when we landed. I was surprised they even let us land. I mean, there was so much whatever was out there, pollution, that when we land, I was looking out the window and I didn't see the runway. So we get to the Olympic Village. They say, this is what you guys are doing. You're going to the village, you're dropping your stuff off, you're grabbing your swim equipment, put your swimsuit on, get your towel, and we're going right to the pool to warm up. And I was like, all right, great. So we go over to the pool, and we walk in, and somehow that bog, smog, or pollution, whatever it was, kind of seeped into the pool, and it was sort of like at the back of the arena. You can see like a little layer on the top of the ceiling. And so we walked in, we're looking over the balcony, just kind of getting a feel like of being at the Olympic Games and being in it's called the Cube is what the pool was called in '08. And we walk in and everyone's looking over the balcony and all the younger kids are like, oh, that's so gross. What's in there? That's, oh gosh, you know. And I like take a step back. I'm like, wow, this is really cool to be back in the Olympic Games again. And like that didn't even bother me. Like I was just so excited to be back at a 5th Olympic Games that I realized at that point in time that I saw things much differently through my eyes of a 41-year-old swimmer than what these teenagers were seeing through the eyes of a teenager. And I'm sure when I was 17 years old, and in fact I know that I was just like them when I was in LA. Like, I don't know, like the Secret Service were after me because I jumped on the stage when Reagan was talking, and I don't know. It was like, it was crazy. But anyway, so I was even like in Beijing, I was going around and thanking all the workers who had no idea what I was talking about. I was trying to thank them like for being there and helping, and you just appreciate it more when you're older. You just, you take things in much differently than when you're younger. My best event's 50 freestyle. I swam that in 2 relays. My first event was the relay, and we won a silver medal there. And now the 50 freestyle is up. Now, one of the things I wanted to be when I came to these Olympic Games is I wanted to be the most prepared. Yeah, I didn't do as many workouts as everyone did, but I took care of myself and I ate the way I was supposed to eat and I trained the way I was supposed to train. And I had the best people working with me and I made sure I recovered all the time. But there's also another factor when you get there. You want to be the most prepared when you're there too. And so the thing that was a little different in Beijing was the Olympic Games, they had the finals in the morning so they could be live here in the United States. And as a swimmer, and some swimmers out there, you always swim finals at night. That's just what your body's been used to your whole entire life. So they changed that. They had the finals at 10 a.m. in the morning. So you'd swim preliminaries in the morning, semifinals at night. The next day you'd swim the finals. And so, so I said to my coach, I'm like, I want to be the first one there. I haven't had a chance to actually swim in the lane I'm going to swim in. I want to be the first one there and warm up. Now, the hardest thing about being at the Olympic Games is the warm-up. It's so crowded that it's just like a cluster in there. It's so hard to get a good warm-up in that. And most of the time, I would go into the other warm-up pool they had on the other side where the crowd doesn't even know that it's in there. You can sometimes see it on TV. And I'd always warm up there, and then I'd swim my race, I'd swim the relay. And so I never really had a chance to warm up in the competition pool. So we get to the pool at 6:45 a.m. There's not one person in there. Well, there's a janitor, and then I think Bob Costas was in a booth. Hey, Bob, hey, Dara, that was it. There was no one there, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And so this is the first time I've ever qualified first in an individual event. So everyone was gunning for me. This is the finals. I'm in lane 4, the top seed's in lane 4. The best medals, best showing I ever had at individual events were bronze medals, which were in Sydney. All my golds and silvers were in relays. So here I am now in an individual event, seeded first. Now I was ranked, coming into this Olympic Games, I was ranked 5th in the world. So how am I like #1, top seed in the Olympic Games? I was excited. Like, I'm like, all right, you guys, come after me, you know? Like, I like the one being chased, not doing the chasing. And so I'm kind of weird like that with the pressure. I just like it. So I dive into the pool, and what I do is I memorize every nook and cranny in the pool, every cable underwater from TV cameras, every still camera in there. Like, I knew where everything was in my lane. I do about 300 to 500 meters. I get out, take a hot shower, I wait a little bit, then I go in and do my normal warm-up. So now I'm ready. Like, I am the most prepared, I feel like. The thing about a lot of the sports is they have what's called a ready room. They have this in the Olympic trials and they have the Olympic Games. So the ready room is where you have to hang out 20 minutes before your race or else you're disqualified. If you're not there 20 minutes before your race, that's it, you're gone. And sometimes you'll see it on TV, like, I know in swimming they have like a little camera in there and you'll see like the swimmers like sitting in chairs and they have their caps on, their goggles and stuff, and they're just waiting to march out, you know, to the music to go onto the deck. And so I walk into this ready room and just imagine like your other 7 competitors are in there and like, what do you say? Oh, hey, what's going on? How's your day? You know, like you don't talk to them. You just kind of walk in and it's like you can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet in there. And everyone was making such a big deal about my age and being a mom and, you know, can her body do this? And this is the Olympic Games, or 5th Olympics. And age was obviously a very, very big storyline for me going into these Olympic Games. So I walk into this ready room and I'm looking at the other 7 competitors. And I look over in the corner, I'm like, God, that girl looks like she's about to throw up. Now I'm in the top 7, you know? And then I look over and God, that girl looks like she's gonna pass out. Now I'm in the top 6, you know? I'm looking at these kids and I'm thinking, they think that this is the most important thing they're ever gonna do in their life, and the most important thing in my life is back at home. And so I had a very different perspective of the Olympic Games than these kids did. Like, to me, I didn't put as much pressure on myself because, you know, my favorite, best thing is at home, my daughter, you know, and they think this is the best thing they'll ever do in their lives, and they have no idea that this isn't the best thing they'll ever do in their lives. And so when I walked in and I saw this happening, that these kids were so nervous, I thought, wow, I have such an advantage being older. Everyone's talking about my age being a disadvantage, but mentally I was so much better prepared for them because I knew what to expect. I knew how to deal with the pressure. Didn't mean that I didn't feel like I was sick to my stomach too, because I was, but I knew how to deal with it. So they call us out, we all march out, and we're in line from lanes 1 through 8, and we go out there and I'm shaking my arms and I'm feeling pretty good, and I've been practicing my starts since Olympic trials. I had the slowest start Olympic trials. I've been practicing every day after workouts and training camp. They actually brought an actual block from the Olympic Games, a duplicate, so I can practice my starts. And every day I was out there and I felt really ready. And I get up there and I shake my arms and I'm feeling nice and loose. And what I like to do on the blocks is I like to rub my hands on there and get them nice and rough, because we're all had massages and there's oil on you and stuff, and you don't want your hand to slip in the water. And so I'm standing there and the official says, take your mark, and I get in the track start position. I bend down and the beeper goes off and I dive in the pool, and I'm feeling really good. It's a little nippy in there, but I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm swimming along my one fast lap. And you know, it's funny because distance swimmers always make fun of sprinters because you do one lap and you're done. But I always feel like the sprint events are so much harder than the distance events, not cardiovascular wise, but just because you can't make a mistake. Your start has to be on, your race has to be on, your finish has to be on. If you make one mistake, you're done. In a distance event, you have a little room, you know, to fix whatever. If you made some mistake, you have lots of room for improvement. Sprinting, you don't. It's just you make one mistake, you're done. So I'm swimming along and I'm feeling pretty good, and I remember where everything was in my lane, and I have no idea where. I always had a problem with looking, even when I got older, like where everyone is. You know, you swim, you turn your head to the side. How can you not look and see where someone is? And so I'm like, I'm not going to look. I'm just going to. It's kind of like a horse, you know, where you have the blinders on and stuff. And I'm feeling really good, and I come in and I touch the wall and I put my goggles up and I look up, and the scoreboard's on the other end of the pool, and I'm like, God, I got these 41-year-old eyes and I can't see anything. And I'm like, does anyone have reading glasses or something? And so I'm squinting and I'm like, okay, I see my name, and I see a number 2 in my name, and I'm like, that's not my lane number, because I was in lane 4. So I guess I got second. I'm like, all right, I guess that's good. You know, a silver medal. My best placing individual event was a bronze. And I look over, I'm like, well, what other country beat me? At least hopefully it's a US person. And I'm looking again and I see GER by the 1. I'm like, a German. I'm like, well, Michael, my coach, was a German. I guess that's okay. And I'm like, well, what were the times? And I'm looking again, I'm squinting, and I see the winner 24.06 and my time 24.07. And now I'm like, okay. So the good thing about swimming is that if you have anything to say, you just go underwater and no one knows what you're saying. Just bubbles come up and get all your aggression out, and it's no big deal. And so I go under the lane and bubbles are coming up. I'm not going to tell you what I was saying. And I go over there and I congratulate the German girl who won, and I come back under and the bubbles are coming up, and I go over to the little 15-year-old Australian freckled-faced girl who got third, and I give her a hug. But the only thing that's going through my head is 100th of a second. I lost by 100th of a second. And when I talk to kids, I always say I got second by 100th of a second. But in my mind, I am so competitive that I lost by 100th of a second. I'm like, what could I have done? What could I have done? I felt like I did everything. I'm like, oh, and I still had a relay 30 minutes later. I had to get out, do one question to NBC, go over and warm down, go to the awards ceremony and get my silver medal, and then go into the ready room again to march out with the relay, because I was anchoring a relay. And so I get out and I go over to NBC, and they stick the microphone in my face like, oh my gosh, 100th of a second, what could you have done? I'm thinking to myself, I was just thinking about that for like the past 5 minutes. And I turned to her and I said, you know what? I said, I shouldn't have filed my nails last night. And I said, I got to go now. And she's like, wait, what? And I'm like, because that's the first thing that pops in my head is like, I was watching House on my computer, trying to like just distract myself so I can fall asleep. And I'm like, God, my nails are kind of long right now. And I'm like, oh, that'll waste 5 minutes. And so I'm like, fine. And I couldn't think, I can't even tell you how many acrylic nails I got sent to me after that comment on TV. But yeah, there was no reason why I shouldn't have won that race. So my coach calls me, Michael. He was supposed to be at the Olympic Games. He unfortunately ended up with a very rare blood disorder called aplastic anemia. And so he was in the hospital while this was going on, which is another real tough thing to kind of put out of your head. And the great thing about the Olympic team is they have people there who help you. They have psychologists, they have other doctors, and so it was really helped me. And I'm not a huge psychologist person to go to one, but I gotta tell you, they helped me so much sort of get through that while he was going through this, while I was over there, you know, training for something that he and I sort of worked together with. So he calls me from his hospital room, and as I'm walking over to the warm down pool to warm down, and he says, Dara, he goes, they just keep showing this replay over and over again. You guys saw it up there. And he said, you know, it just looks like you didn't touch the touchpad hard enough. I'm like, after everything I've done, this whole comeback, it's just a matter of touching the touchpad hard enough. He's like, that's what I think. He goes, go warm down, get ready, you know, for your award ceremony and get ready for this relay. You'll do great. I said, okay. So warmed down, not as long as I wanted to. I was kind of rushed. I went and got my silver medal, which you guys saw. And then I hurry up and put my suit back on, I get in the ready room, and I march out for the relay. And I swim the race, and we were a little bit behind, actually kind of a lot behind. And I caught up a little bit, and we ended up with a silver medal. So I finished the Olympics with 3 silver medals. And I get out, I'm like, oh, my thumb is really hurting. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, whatever, you know, and I go get my medal. Well, ended up I broke my thumb and tore a ligament off the bone because I touched the touchpad too hard. So I definitely listened to my coach as well, that's for sure. Anyway, people ask me all the time what it takes to wage a successful comeback. It's really simple. You have to want to keep winning, and you have to want it badly. You have to be determined to move closer to reaching your full potential rather than let your goals slip away. And I want to read one more thing to you. Marion Wright Edelman was a great American woman and the founder of the Children's Defense Fund. She wrote, I'm really grateful to have something that I'm passionate about and that to me is important. She says, you're not obligated to win, you're only obligated to keep trying and do the best you can. And that is great advice because we don't win every day. Sometimes you just have to simply settle for the silver. You know, I learned a lot in that comeback. I really thought I was done. The great thing about a sport, and for me, obviously swimming, you learn about hard work, you learn about dedication, you learn about sacrifices. You know, there's a lot you learn. I learned that in the Olympics. One of the things that they asked me on that last relay, NBC came back and interviewed all of us, and she asked me if there was something that my daughter can take away when she gets older from this experience, what would you tell her? And I said, you know, probably just not to put an age limit on your dreams. And when I would dive in the water didn't know my age, so what did it matter how old I was? As long as I qualified and was one of the fastest, I deserved to go. It didn't matter I was 41 years old. I know some of the younger kids didn't feel that way because I probably took their spots, but you know, the best is the best, doesn't matter how old you are. Another thing I learned is complacency isn't an option. I was never complacent the whole entire time I was training for those 2008 Olympics. And you just don't put an age limit on your dreams. We all have setbacks in life, but they have an upside. They fuel new dreams. And I mean, I had a lot of setbacks. When I first made my comeback, my father passed away, and then Michael ended up with this disease. And it's just a lot of pressure, too. I felt like going into the Olympic Games that all the middle-aged people were looking at me to do something good so they could go do something good or would inspire them. And I mean, that's a lot of pressure for someone who never really had pressure before, you know, going into the Olympic Games. And I don't know how Michael Phelps does it, but it was hard. But then I learned that, you know, there are people who look at what I would do and maybe they stopped doing something because they thought they were too old or they didn't think they could balance like being a parent and doing what they love to do. And I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards and say that it really inspired them. So that really made me feel good. I didn't expect to keep swimming after the Olympics. Michael was sick and I had a knee injury, but then a year later were the Rome World Championships. I'm like, Italy's kind of cool. And so I swam for another year and I made the World Championship team, went to Rome in the summer of 2009. And by that time, my knee was really trashed. And people say, well, how do you trash your knee in swimming? There's all the dryland training I did outside of the pool that trashed my knee and sort of genetic stuff too. My mom had 2 knee replacements. And so I had to get that fixed. I had a cartilage transplant and and they had to reconstruct my knee. And so it was a long recovery. But in the summer of 2010, about a year later, Michael was really declining. His health was declining even more, and he was supposed to get a bone marrow transplant, and that kind of got put off because he was so sick. And so we were at lunch one day, and I was just enjoying my life, you know, life after swimming, and I don't know, I just wasn't doing a lot, and just being a mom. And Michael, we at lunch said, you know, Dara, we need to finish this book. And I'm like, wait, am I writing another book? And he said, no, our book. I'm like, what book? And he said, our book. And I'm like, okay, well, what book? And he said, the book that we still need to keep going. We haven't finished our book yet with you swimming. I'm like, whoa, I'm like 40-something years old. I said, I'm almost in menopause. I'm not gonna keep, you know, swimming. And he's not really, but and he said, no, this is great because you've been off now not only just age, but now you're like overcoming a knee injury and, you know, all these things. And, you know, I was looking at him, he was just this ashen face, and I was like, you know, I really think maybe this will give him a little bit of or make him want to live longer, or, you know. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I started training for 2012. Imagine, like, it's not like you're 21 years old going 4 years later at 25 years old. I'm 41 going 4 years later at 45. And like 5 workouts went to 4 workouts, and the recovery was much harder, and I wasn't winning my races, and it was really tough on me mentally to do this, but I wanted to do it. It really seemed to bring a smile to Michael's face, and that's what I wanted. And so I decided to train for it, and about 9 months into it, he unfortunately had passed away, and I just thought, you know, I want to keep doing this. I want to do this for him. And so I continued on, and I went to Olympic trials in 2012, and I missed the team by 9/100ths of a second at 45. And it's funny because, you know, I look at the time that I did, and there was only one other Olympic trials that I went faster, which was in 2008. 84, 88, 92, 2000. This time in 2012 was faster than all those Olympic trials I went to. But so I realized that the girls are just getting faster, you know. I'm not really getting slower, they're just getting a lot faster. And I thought, okay, now it's really time for me to hang up my suits to dry. And, you know, it's amazing. I understand how big dreams work, how small they start in a single person. But once they take hold, they grow so much larger and so much more powerful than anyone could have guessed. When you've done something almost your entire life that's been your passion, it's been your life, it's what you know, what you live and breathe, how do you move on to something new? And for me, that was kind of hard, but not hard, because when I retired, I was like, what am I going to do in my life now, you know? And I didn't know. I knew I still wanted to get into television. I already had a book, and I did a fitness book too, and I wasn't really sure. And my whole life has always been so structured, and I think that's the hardest thing for athletes to figure out, is what do they do with their life after they're done with their sport, because they're so used to being told what to do and how to do it and where you need to be and what your life is, and this is your whole plan, and now you're done and you don't have a plan. And it's very difficult, I think, for athletes when they're done swimming. But I thankfully had a guy that I ended up marrying, and he has 2 kids, and my daughter, and we all moved to Massachusetts, and I feel like I have a really good life now. But it's really not easy for athletes. You know, to me, it's like you have to set new goals, you have to dream new dreams, and you have to start a new chapter in your life. And that's sort of the way I guess, kind of looked at my life when I finally hung up that final suit to dry. And it's so funny, because at Olympic trials in 2012, I got out of the pool, and I was almost kind of relieved that I wasn't upset, because I gave it everything I had. I looked back on 2008, and there's really nothing, I mean, nails and all, I gave it everything I had. It just wasn't my day to win the silver medal. And that took a lot for me to get to that point. And so when I got out of the pool in 2012, I was okay. I got out, and I went over to NBC, and they interviewed me, and my daughter came down. She was 6 then, and I was holding her, and she was crying, and I'm like, why is she crying? And then I see my mom in the stands, and she's crying, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to console everyone. They're supposed to be consoling me, and I'm consoling them. And I figured out with my daughter that she was bummed because she didn't think she was going to see Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte. But my mom, on the other hand, was just bummed, because I think she just, you know, it's your mom. She wants you to go and win and everything like that. But so it was a wonderful experience. I get asked all the time, what was your favorite part? And everyone assumes I'm going to say, oh, this medal or this record. But for me, it was really what I learned about myself on this road to get there. you know, it was a journey. Every Olympics was different for me. And there was one Olympic Games where I had a really bad eating disorder when I was in college and had to get through that. And the first Olympics, I was a 17-year-old punk kid. And, you know, in 92, I was considered the grandma. And then in 2000, you know, at 33, the great grandma. And then at 41, oh no, you know what they call me. But so it was a big learning experience. And it's not the medals that was most important for me. It's what I learned about myself and what I learned about what it took to do what I did. And that was the most important thing. I mean, the medals are nice, and my daughter likes showing her friends, but I never take them out unless someone asks. And it's just, it's what you feel inside about what you've done, you know, for yourself. And so I'm going to end it there and open it up for questions if you guys have some questions you'd like to ask me.